This episode is sponsored by Able Now, tax advantage savings accounts for eligible individuals with disabilities. If you're a parent, you know how important it is to plan for your child's future. But if your child has a disability, saving money can feel complicated, especially when you're trying to protect their eligibility for certain benefits like Medicaid. That's where Able Now comes in. Able Now accounts offer a tax-advantaged way to save for your child's future needs without jeopardizing eligibility for those critical disability services and supports. Funds in your account can be used for a wide range of expenses, everything from education to healthcare, housing, transportation, and even basic living expenses. Able Now accounts are available to qualified individuals in all 50 states. Are you eligible? Visit ablenow.com to learn how you can start saving today and join thousands of families using Able Now to secure a brighter future for their loved ones.
When we teach to the middle or assume that every kid who's 13 years old is going to learn the exact same content in the exact same amount of time. That's not how learning works. That's miserable for teachers. And so we need to say, if you actually want the student at Eastern High School in Washington, D.C. to master something like pre-calculus, and they come in without those skills, you got to give them time. You got to give them extra support. And you've also got to let those advanced students zoom ahead. So I think sometimes people think equity equals standardization. I don't think that's the case. I think equity means that we need to take every learner as they come to us, regardless of their needs, and figure out a way to meet them.
I'm Debbie Reber, and welcome to Tilt Parenting, a podcast featuring interviews and conversations aimed at inspiring, informing, and supporting parents raising differently wired kids. Today, I have a really interesting conversation for you about a relatively new instruction model that's designed to create learning environments that truly meet the needs of every student. It's called the Modern Classroom Project, and my guest is Rob Barnett, the co-founder of the model, as well as the author of the new book that describes this approach called Meet Every Learner's Needs, Redesigning Instruction so all learners can succeed. Rob has spent years teaching across different subjects and age groups, and he's passionate about transforming education to be more flexible, engaging, and student-centered. In this episode, you'll hear Rob break down the modern classroom instructional model, which gives students more agency over their learning by allowing them to move at their own pace and collaborate with each other to achieve mastery. He also explains why instructional videos can enhance accessibility, how mastery checks help confirm readiness before advancing to the next lesson, and how ultimately this model prioritizes the critical role of teacher-student relationships in fostering engagement and trust. Rob also shared insights into why traditional educational systems often struggle to meet the needs of all their learners, as well as how parents can share the modern classroom resources with their kids' teachers or school administrators. I love talking with people who are on a mission to shake up big systems. This is definitely one of those inspirational conversations. I hope you enjoy it. Here is my conversation with Rob Barnett. Hey, Rob, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Yeah, I'm glad you reached out to me to tell me about your new book, and I'm just going to put the name out there right now. It's called Meet Every Learner's Needs, Redesigning Instruction so all students can succeed. And you reached out to me about the book, and of course, it piqued my interest because so much of what parents in my community are doing is advocating for their kids' educational preferences and how they navigate learning for those needs to be met in school. So I think this will be a really interesting conversation. Before we get into your educational model, I would love if you could take a few minutes and just tell us a little bit of your story and how you came to be doing the work that you do.
Sure. Thank you for mentioning the book. I certainly didn't intend to or set out to write a book. I became a teacher because I love working with young people, and I always have. And when I became a teacher, I really struggled. I found it very difficult in any one of my classes to meet the various needs of every learner. I mean, every learner really has different needs. And I would walk into class one day and some of my students would be right with me. They'd have grade level skills or they'd be advanced. They were hungry for a challenge. Some students came to my classes. I taught high school math with gaps in their math skills, gaps in their math confidence. They needed more support. Some students weren't there at all, or they were distracted. And so I was faced with this room full of students all needing different things. And I realized if I try to teach one lesson today to all these students, well, my advanced students will be bored. My students who need more support will be lost, and the students who aren't there are going to miss out altogether. So I needed to find a way to meet all of these learners' needs. What I ended up doing was taking pieces from other teachers, developing an instructional model that helped me help all of those learners succeed. It made teaching much more enjoyable for me too. I felt like I spent class not policing behavior from the front of the room, but really doing what I wanted to do, which was getting to know young people, building relationships with young people, watching them learn and succeed. This method of teaching worked for me. I shared it with some of my colleagues. It worked for them. We started a nonprofit in 2018 called the Modern Classrooms Project, basically just to train other teachers in Washington, D.C. in this approach. Since then, we've grown. We've now trained about 80,000 teachers all over the world in this approach. I wrote a book to explain how does a modern classroom work? What is this instructional model? What are the strategies teachers can use? And I also wanted it to be a book that would be accessible for parents and policymakers and administrators. I'm a parent myself. My kids are only 2 and 4, so I'm a very inexperienced parent. But I think about what they're going to get from school, what I want them to get from school, what kind of instruction I want for them. And the book is partly talking about that, what I believe every young person should get when they're in school.
As you were sharing your story, I wrote down the words, why you? And what my mind was thinking when I wrote those words down is what you shared in terms of your experience as a new teacher and recognizing the diversity of the learning styles in your classroom and the profiles of the students and thinking like, how am I going to meet everybody's needs? I think that's probably got to be common among teachers. And so I'm curious about what was it about you, or maybe this goes back to your own educational background as a student and a young learner yourself, that made you think, I'm going to change this. I can come up with something that's going to address this.
Yeah, that's a good question. And I don't know that I have a good answer. I mean, I know that what I was facing is a challenge that every teacher faces. And I was lucky in my career, especially early on, to work at a school with a lot of other great teachers who helped me sort of identify strategies to meet various learners' needs. I was also at that time in my life, I was young. I didn't have kids. I could work very hard to figure out how to make this work. And I ended up just meeting great colleagues, including my Modern Classrooms co-founder, Kareem Farah, who realized, I think, the potential of this idea. And we decided to share it. And I think we realized that this does solve a challenge that a lot of teachers face. I don't think I'm far from the first person to say we should be educating our students differently. In some way, the original modern classroom was a one-room schoolhouse back when we, I think, had an educational model where students did learn at their own paces and students did reach mastery. So I'm not the first or only person to have these ideas. I think what I and Modern Classrooms Project have figured out how to do is just package it in a way that any teacher anywhere who's a little frustrated with the challenge of teaching feels like, here are some strategies that I can actually use with my students. Here are strategies that have worked for other teachers around the world. And, that's what the book and the nonprofit are about, is just sharing these ideas with any teacher that they can help, sharing these ideas also with parents who want to see educational experiences that meet their learners' needs, whether your kid is the most advanced student in the class and wants the most challenging problems, whether your kid struggles in math because their education has caused them to lack confidence, whether your student misses class sometimes because of health issues. Like, you want the student to go into school to be challenged, to be supported, to have relationships with teachers, not to be left behind or held back. And that's the goal of all these strategies.
I would love if you could explain the modern classroom instructional model. I'm so curious to hear that story of making that first instructional video, because I think when you did that, it was such an interesting time in the world because it was actually pre-COVID. And so I think the timing of what you created was also so wonderful. So yeah, would you tell us a little bit about what the approach is? And as part of that, share that story of how you went about and why you thought instructional video is a piece of this.
Of course. Yeah. What really got me is I taught a first period class, pre-calculus class, There were about 20 students in the class. And some days there would be 5 in the room when the bell rang because students lived far away or they had to drop off younger siblings or whatever. They couldn't make it to school. And then throughout class, students would come in when they arrived. And I just realized it's not going to be possible for me to stand at the front of the room and teach a math lesson in these circumstances. Because students will miss a few days at a time or they'll come in halfway through like, I can't do this. I'm going to quit. But I didn't want to quit. So I realized I could take the lessons I was giving from the front of the room and just put them on video. A very simple video, right? I didn't have a studio or anything. I would basically just start a video call with myself. I don't know if Zoom was around, so I could use Skype. I'd start a video call with myself. I'd hit record. I would explain some math concept, and then I'd hit stop record. I would have a video, and I would put that online for students to watch. That small thing had such a profound difference in my room because now when students walked in, they could just start with watching the video. I mean, they could watch it at home, but they could also watch it in class. They could come in, they could watch the video. They could pause. They could rewind. They could take notes. If they had a question, they could just call me over because I was no longer at the front of the room demanding quiet from the students, and I could answer it. And that was so much more comfortable for students, by the way. It can be really intimidating to raise your hand in class and ask a question in front of all your peers. But when you're watching a video, you just pause the video, call me over, or ask a classmate, hey, did you understand this piece? And so now my students were learning at their own paces, right? Some students who were there every day and understood the material really quickly, they would watch the video. After the video, which was always quite short, by the way, 5 or 10 minutes, students would close the computers. They would do work together on paper. Math is a good subject to do on paper, so students would watch the video, close the computer, find another student to work with, do some practice on paper. When they were ready, they would say, Mr. Barnett, I understand this. I'm ready for the next lesson. And at that point, I would give them something I call a mastery check, just a very quick assessment to see, do you understand this or not? If the student proves they understand it, they're on to the next video and on to the next lesson. If the student doesn't understand it yet, I say, hang on a minute. Let's go back to the video. Let's find a classmate. Let me explain to you your misconception so that instead of the student moving on to the next skill unprepared, they actually have the time and support to build mastery. In any subject, that's so important, right? You achieve success in one lesson, you're prepared for the next lesson, and you probably feel a little bit of confidence too, like, hey, if I work hard, I can learn this. And so now instead of the student walking into class, having to sit quiet, listen to me, explain something they already know or can't understand, they spend time in class watching a short video, working with their classmates, seeing whether or not they understand, and then advancing or reviewing accordingly. And it was those simple videos that made this whole approach possible. I loved it because I spent class sitting down with my students, getting to know them, helping them learn. And my students loved it because they weren't like being dragged through content at a pace that didn't work for them. They actually could reach understanding. They could work closely with me. They could ask their friends for help. It really worked.
Let's take a quick break, and then I want to ask a little bit more about that moment when you're like, okay, I think this is scalable, or this is something that I can share with other teachers. We'll be right back. One of the ways I can tell I'm growing and evolving as a parent and a human is that when I have difficult interactions or stressful periods in my life, I know to reach for a tool or strategy that can help me regulate my nervous system and get myself centered and calm so I'm better able to weather that particular storm. One of my most favorite go-to resources for such moments, and also just to proactively tend to my mental and emotional well-being, is the Calm app. Calm is the #1 app for sleep and meditation, giving you the power to calm your mind and change your life. Mental health and healthiness isn't one size fits all, which is why Calm offers a variety of tools to help navigate life's ups and downs. From meditations designed to ease anxiety, improve focus, and build healthy habits, to sleep stories, soothing music, and guided exercises for relaxation, there's something for whatever you need in the moment. Calm also features expert-led talks on topics like grief, self-esteem, and relationships, making it easy to access support anytime, anywhere. Just a few minutes a day can make a big difference, and Calm puts those tools right in your pocket. Stress less, sleep more, and live better with Calm. For listeners of our show, Calm is offering an exclusive offer of 40% off a Calm premium subscription at calm.com/tilt. Go to calm.com/tilt for 40% off unlimited access to Calm's entire library. That's calm.com/tilt. I don't like going clothing shopping, especially when I'm looking for something specific, like for an event. I get overwhelmed with the whole process and I can spend hours looking for the right thing, but I usually come home empty-handed. So I'm really loving Quince, my new go-to for luxury essentials at affordable prices. It's one-stop shopping online for really well-designed and well-made clothes, like their 100% Mongolian cashmere sweaters from $50, washable silk tops and dresses, and organic cotton sweaters. I recently got this really cool, kind of fancy black silk top that I would never have gravitated toward in a store due to that shopping overwhelm, not to mention I can only imagine what the price tag would have been in a traditional store. But Quince's prices are 50 to 80% less than similar brands because they partner directly with top factories. So they're cutting out the middleman and they're passing those savings on to you. Plus, Quince only works with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing practices. Oh, and Quince doesn't just have clothes. You can also find other high-quality luxe products like Italian leather handbags and European linen sheets. Give yourself the luxury you deserve with Quince. Go to quince.com/tilt for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's QUINCE.com/tilt to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/tilt. Once I find a recipe I love, I make it on repeat until I either get tired of it or get distracted by something new. I also crave variety, but all the executive functioning required to plan, shop, and prep just slows me down. That's why I love Green Chef. It takes the guesswork out of mealtime by delivering pre-measured, prepped ingredients straight to my door. With fresh produce, lean proteins, and whole grains, it makes healthy eating simple and stress-free. If you're looking to reset your eating habits in a sustainable way, you might want to check out Green Chef's Reset Collection, which is available for a limited time. These are dietitian-approved meals that offer fiber support, are lower in saturated fat, and come in under 700 calories per serving. With pre-portioned ingredients and simple prep, it is a stress-free way to enjoy meals that support your health and fit your lifestyle. Also, Green Chef is owned by HelloFresh, so you get even more meal plan options with the convenience of both brands. So I love switching back and forth between the two, and now my listeners can enjoy a discount on both brands with me. Thrive all year with clean, easy meals from Green Chef. Go to greenchef.com/tiltfree and use code TILTFREE to get started with free salads for 2 months plus 50% off your first box. That's free salads for 2 months plus 50% off your first box when you go to greenchef.com/tiltfree and use code TILTFREE. Green Chef, the #1 meal kit for eating well. As you're describing this, it's so interesting, and I'm picturing what this actually looked like. And the way you describe it in the book also helped me visualize this very collaborative environment, relationship-based learning, and all of these things where students really are engaged, right? That's the goal here, is engage students. And so you did this in your math class. And at what point did you start to realize this actually is really working in a way that I want to amplify this? I want to spread the word and see if we can grow this and actually create this new approach.
That's a great question. Before I answer that, I will just say if you're wondering what this looks like, I often think this is kind of like a college library or a college study hall. You'll see students in groups working together. They might have a computer open with the video, but students who are all on lesson 3 are working on lesson 3 together. And then you'll see students working independently. They might be watching the video for lesson 1 or lesson 2. And then I'm sort of just walking around the room answering questions. It's not every student sitting in rows looking at the board. It's much more dynamic, like a productive college library. But now I can answer your actual question, which is about when I thought this would grow. Like I say, I wasn't trying to create an instructional model or share something. It really was pretty organic. I had a colleague named Kareem Farah. He taught downstairs from me. He arrived at the school a few years after I did. He was struggling with the same challenges I was struggling with. I said, why don't you come up here and observe my class, see how I do it? He came up and he said, wow, this could really work for me. he started teaching this way. He went home that night. He made his first video. He put in place some of the same systems that I had to support this kind of learning. Now there were two of us. I ended up leaving this school. I moved abroad to teach at another school. But the year I left, he was named the most innovative educator in DC public schools, which is where we were teaching. And there was a big sort of gala, and there was a video of his classroom. And some of our colleagues started to say, wow, this was cool. Like, I sort of heard that you guys were teaching this way, but now that I see it, I get it. I want to learn. I was abroad, but I came back to DC over the summer, and we just trained 8 of our colleagues. We showed them how our classrooms worked. We taught them how to create videos, and we formed a nonprofit basically to raise money to buy them computers to do this because they needed the equipment to do this. So we showed them, here's how to make a video. Here's how to make a mastery check. Here's how you get students really working together, even in a classroom that is kind of self-paced. And it was interesting because Kareem and I were both math teachers. Now we were training history teachers and English teachers and science teachers, and we didn't really know if it was going to work, but we sort of said to the teachers, here's our approach, here's our training, see if it works. It did really work for those teachers. They were happier, their students were happier, they felt like they could meet all their learners' needs. So then in the summer of 2019, we recruited 25 teachers now from all over Washington, D.C. to take our training. We trained them again. It was effective for them as well. Over winter break of 2019 to 2020, we said, next year, I think we should try to train 50 teachers. That would be a big goal for us. Well, COVID happened. In 2020, we ended up training over 700 teachers from all over the world because there was just this huge appetite for I can't stand at the front of the class and teach anymore because there is no classroom. I'm on Zoom. Students can't log in. They can't connect. I need something different. There was an appetite for a more flexible sort of approach to teaching. And we've continued to grow every year since then, even now that teachers are back in school. As you mentioned, this was a model that we developed before COVID. We think that this is what students and teachers need, whether they're virtual or in the classroom. And I think it continues to grow because it's a really fundamental challenge for a teacher. In any class, you have students who are ahead, who are behind, who aren't there, or who are distracted. Each of those students deserves to be appropriately challenged and supported. How does a teacher do that? That's what we try to help teachers answer.
Yeah. And as you say in the book, teaching to the middle just doesn't work. I've referenced Todd Rose's book, The End of Average, on this show before, and it seems like that is what so many educational institutions are doing, are teaching to this middle that doesn't really even exist. And I'm wondering, when you started doing this, did you get pushback from admin? You were in a public school system. It seems very kind of creative and not a typical way. And we know that big systems can be hard to change or to be open to new ways of doing things. So what did that look like?
Yeah, I was lucky. I had supportive administrators, but certainly in our work with modern classrooms, we run into all sorts of kind of skepticism about this model. And I think skepticism is always justified. The education of our young people is so important. We should be skeptical of the latest sort of new thing. I don't think the modern classroom model, by the way, is the latest new thing. I think we've known for decades that students have different needs. They learn at different paces. And when you help them achieve mastery at their own paces, that's productive. But I think a lot of people worry about putting students on screens. And I think that worry is justified. I don't want my kids on screens all day either. I think we try to help them understand modern classroom is not students on a computer all day. It is using the computer to replace a very small part of class, which is the teacher's direct instruction. Then students close the computer and they work together. And actually, in my experience, the modern classroom was much more human because I was no longer at the front of the room policing behavior. I was sitting down with my students, getting to know them, and they were free to work together too. It wasn't like no one speaks while the teacher is speaking. Everyone could work together freely. So it was very human in that way. I think another bit of pushback that we're facing is I think there are compelling arguments for standardization in schools, standard curriculum. We want to make sure that whether you go to school in a wealthy neighborhood or a poor neighborhood, you have access to high quality curriculum. And so that puts pressure on standardizing things. I think we also have to see that when we teach to the middle or assume that every kid who's 13 years old is going to learn the exact same content in the exact same amount of time, like that's not how learning works. That's miserable for teachers. And so we need to say, if you actually want the student at Eastern High School in Washington, D.C. to master something like pre-calculus, and they come in without those skills, you got to give them time. You got to give them extra support. And you've also got to let those advanced students zoom ahead. So I think sometimes people think equity equals standardization. I don't think that's the case. I think equity means that we need to take every learner as they come to us, regardless of their needs, and figure out a way to meet them.
Okay, I want to ask one more question about how the curriculum might differ or be similar to UDL, but let's take a quick break and we'll do that. My husband, Darren, and I have a lot going on right now, and we are both wired in such a way that routine is a serious antidote to feeling discombobulated or out of sorts. And that's one of the big reasons why we're such fans of Factor. Chef-crafted, fresh, fully prepared meals delivered straight to our door. Factor ticks all the boxes for us. That they are delivered on the same day each week and are predictably healthy feels grounding. That they're just the right portion size and ready in 2 minutes takes the guesswork out of figuring out what's for dinner, or in Darren's case, lunch, as Factor has become his go-to for weekday meals. This week's favorite meal, grilled chicken with mushrooms and rice. If eating well feels like one more thing on your plate, Factor makes it easy. There are 40 meal options each week across 8 dietary preferences, including keto, protein plus, and calorie smart. Plus, Factor's smoothies, breakfast, and grab-and-go snacks can keep you fueled all day long. If you want to jumpstart your health goals, Factor will help you stay on track with their quality ingredients and unbeatable convenience, no matter how busy your life gets. Eat smart with Factor. Get started at factormeals.com/factorpodcast and use code FACTORPODCAST to get 50% off your first box plus free shipping. That's code FACTORPODCAST at factormeals.com/factorpodcast to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first box.
Does it ever feel like you're a marketing professional just speaking into the void? Well, with LinkedIn ads, you can know you're reaching the right decision makers. You can even target buyers by job title, industry, company, seniority, skills. Wait, did I say job title yet? Get started today and see how you can avoid the void and reach the right buyers with LinkedIn ads. We'll even give you a $100 credit on your next campaign. Get started at linkedin.com/results. Terms and conditions apply.
Imagine what's possible when learning doesn't get in the way of life. At Capella University, our game-changing FlexPath learning format lets you set your own deadlines so you can learn at a time and pace that works for you. It's an education you can tailor to your schedule. That means you don't have to put your life on hold to pursue your professional goals. Instead, enjoy learning your way and earn your degree without missing a beat. A different future is closer than you think with Capella University. Learn more at capella.edu.
So on the show, we've had conversations about universal design for learning and that being a really powerful way to teach neurodivergent students, especially. And so I'm wondering, do comparisons come up, or how would you differentiate for listeners who are kind of interested in different philosophical approaches? How would you differentiate what you're doing through modern classrooms with UDL?
Yeah, I love UDL. We've actually had people from CAST, which is the organization that promotes UDL, sort of look at our materials, look at our approach, do sort of an audit to make sure that we are in line with UDL. And they say, we all feel like we're working towards the same mission, which is making sure that every student, regardless of their needs, is challenged and supported. I think when I look at UDL, I see it as a powerful framework. I think what Modern Classrooms is trying to do is give teachers the more practical tools as opposed to the theoretical framework to make this happen in their room every day. You know, I think if you have an instructional video, that's a powerful tool that changes the way your classroom works and lets you respond to every learner's needs, lets learners continue learning outside of class. One thing I didn't mention is I think it's great for families. Your student can watch the video at home with the family and continue learning there. So I think that's a great tool that opens up meeting every learner's needs. It's not evident right away what makes for a great video or how to record a video or what tool you should use or how you share it with students, all those things. And so I think what Modern Classrooms does is try to give really detailed guidance to teachers, like, here's how you make that video. You want to have a mastery check to make sure that students understand lesson 1 before they go to lesson 2. Here's how you create a mastery check. And so I look at Modern Classrooms project as being aligned with the theory and framework of UDL, but putting more practical techniques that any teacher can use tomorrow to create a more inclusive and equitable classroom.
You've talked about this mastery check a couple of times, and I do want to go into that a little bit deeper and just understand, how do you define the concept of mastery? My understanding with UDL, and I'm not an expert in it at all, but part of it is helping kids display or share their mastery or knowledge of a subject in different ways: writing, singing, music, art, whatever kind of taps into the kind of learner that they are. But could you define mastery for us and explain a little bit more what those mastery checks might look like?
Yeah, sure. I mean, certainly in math, but I think in a lot of other subjects too, knowledge always builds on itself. And so if you want a student to learn something advanced and they don't have the foundational skills, they're going to struggle on that advanced topic. And you as a teacher are going to end up having to refill that gap again and again and again. And Sal Khan from Khan Academy has this great analogy of, like, you're trying to build a house on an incomplete foundation. So you should build the foundation first before you start building the house. I think for me, the purpose of the mastery check is more important than the form. It's to make sure that the student is ready to learn the advanced skill, has the foundations in place. And so I think what we often share with teachers is a typical mastery check is probably a half sheet of paper with one question that a student answers tied to the objective of the lesson. And if you have it, great, you move to the next thing. If not, you revise. But we also tell teachers, look, it's the purpose that matters. A mastery check is not a half sheet of paper with one question. A mastery check is letting you know that the student is ready to advance. And if the student prefers to come and sit with you and explain, and you say, okay, go ahead, move to the next video, that's fine. If the student prefers to create something else that shows mastery, that works also. I often, as a teacher, like to do those oral mastery checks where I said, okay, Debbie, you're working on right triangles right now. Like, before you move to trigonometry, you got to show me that you can solve the sides of a right triangle. Come sit down. Like, explain to me how you would find it. And I can figure out in 10 seconds whether you understand it or not. That was often fine for me. And then I'd say, I think you're missing one thing, so go back to the video. Or great, like, now you're ready for trigonometry. So yeah, I think the mastery check is really about the purpose. And for teachers who can think of multiple means by which learners can express mastery, I'm all for that.
Yeah. Everything that you're sharing, it also sounds relationship-based. It sounds respectful. No shame, no falling behind, just kind of really respecting where everybody is, which feels really good. As you're talking, I'm wondering how the students respond, because it's different, right? If they go into a classroom where this is the way that the teacher is approaching curriculum for the first time and they're used to zoning out, right? Well, the lecture's happening. This is a much more hands-on approach. You have a section in the book called Engagement as Behavior Management. I also just interviewed Rebecca Winthrop and Jenny Anderson about their book, The Disengaged Teen. So I think engagement is just such a big piece of the work that you're doing and what we're talking about today. I'm just curious what the feedback or response has been from students, generally speaking. And then also, if you could talk a little bit about what you mean when you say engagement is really the road to behavior management, or it's kind of the same thing.
Yeah, I'll start with that. When I was being trained to be a teacher, I learned a lot of behavior management techniques, like how to control the class's attention and how I should make students sit and track me with their eyes and all of these things. And I think the theory was, if you can control their behavior, you can engage them in the content. And I found that to be backwards. To me, if you can engage them in the content, you can control their behavior. And I don't mean control their behavior in a menacing way. I mean, like, you can get them to behave how you want, because I start from the assumption that every child wants to be successful. They want to learn. They want to feel the pride that comes with learning. To the extent that students are disengaged or display apathy, I often think of that almost as a defense mechanism. Like, if I'm sitting in class and I didn't understand the foundations of math in 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade, now I'm in 9th grade, I know I'm not going to understand it. I haven't been prepared to understand it, so I'm going to disengage. Or if I'm super advanced and I love math and I do math at home with my family, like, I'm sitting in this 9th grade math class, this is so dull. I already learned this. I'm ready for a challenge. I'm going to disengage. Oftentimes, the most disruptive students I had were the ones who were the most advanced in math, because when I was teaching to the middle, there was nothing for them. So that's what I mean as by engagement as behavior management. If you can figure out how to appropriately challenge and appropriately support every learner every day, you're not going to have behavior management challenges. Students are going to want to learn because every person wants to succeed. In terms of how students respond, this is an adjustment. And oftentimes in the beginning of the year, students flop. They're not used to having the freedom. They're used to sitting and getting. And when you give students more autonomy, they don't always know how to handle it. One thing I should clarify, by the way, is when I say students learn at their own paces, it's not for the entire year. It's often a week at a time or 2 weeks at a time. And then students would start fresh on the next topic. So maybe that first week or second week or even the first month, students sort of think, oh, wow, this is great. Like, Mr. Barnett's not standing at the front of the room yelling at me. I can just sort of coast. I don't really have to work. And building relationships with students helps them see that if they're not going to use their time in class, they're not going to succeed. And they won't do well on assessments, or they won't feel good about what they're learning in class. I think when you have the time to sit down with young people and build relationships with them and explain why you're teaching in this unusual way, students get it. Like, oh, wow, you're telling me that if I'm confused about something, I can take an extra day to learn it, and I can ask you questions whenever I want, and I can ask my friends for help. Amazing. Or you're telling me that I can just go through things as quickly as I want to learn as much as I can. Like, amazing. Once they see that it's built for them, I think they understand the value of it. And it is an adjustment. But actually, what's unusual shouldn't be this form of learning. What's unusual is the idea that every 13-year-old is going to learn the exact same amount of content every day. That makes no sense to me.
Yeah, same. And I like that, talking about the why we're doing it this way, but also why are we learning this in the first place? Like, that is the key to engagement. I think you've said a couple times what I believe so deeply. And Ned Johnson, a friend of mine who wrote a wonderful book, The Self-Driven Child, is always saying kids want their lives to work out, right? We just want to tap into their intrinsic motivation. And I think this is such a nice way to do that and to help them have that sense of agency. As a way of wrapping up, I'm just thinking of my listeners who are thinking, yeah, this would be great to have in our school system. How are you reaching out to schools? And how can listeners, we do have educators and therapists who listen to the show as well, but it's predominantly parents of neurodivergent kids. How can they play a role in getting their schools to be open to looking at how they're teaching in a different way?
I spent a lot of time in the book talking about the challenges of being a teacher and the challenges I faced. And I think in the same way that as a teacher, I tried to empathize with my students and their families, I think it's useful for parents to empathize with teachers and just understand, like, this is why it's hard to be a teacher. You know, I want the teacher to give all their attention to my child, but the teacher has 20, 30 kids in the room, all have different needs. Like, this is the challenge. I think once you understand why it's so hard to be a teacher, you can relate to the teacher and perhaps suggest, like, I heard about this approach. It's created by teachers. A lot of teachers are using it. I wonder if this might make life easier for you. I wonder if you think this could work. And I always feel like as a teacher talking with parents, we're all on the same side, right? Sometimes we feel like we're at odds because we're talking about a student who's experiencing challenges, but we all want the same thing, which is for the teacher to succeed, the student to succeed, the family to succeed. And so I always appreciated when parents came to me with that feeling of, hey, here's an idea. Have you learned about this? Have you thought about this? Have you tried this? And I did often learn a lot from parents who shared those sorts of things. The Modern Classrooms Project is a nonprofit. We have all of our resources for teachers that are free online. We have a free online course that any teacher or any parent can take. I would encourage parents listening to spend a little time on our website just understanding the approach, and then think about how can you share this with, could be the teacher, could be the principal, not in a way like you need to do this because it's better, even though that may be what I believe. But hey, I heard a teacher talking about the challenges that he faced. I heard some ideas that seemed like they worked for him. This organization has helped teachers all over the place. There's free resources. Maybe you could check it out. And I think our goal at Modern Classrooms Project is always to create resources that feel accessible to teachers, things that they can do tomorrow to change, to do better and do better for their students. And the book, the same. These are strategies that have worked for me, work for other teachers, and I hope can work for the teachers of all your listeners as well.
That's great. Thank you so much. And I'll just repeat the name of the book. Again, it's Meet Every Learner's Needs, Redesigning Instruction so all students can succeed. Can you let listeners know the best places to learn more about the Modern Classroom?
Yeah, absolutely. So Modern Classrooms Project, the website is just modernclassrooms.org. And our work is focused on teachers, but we try to share this model with everyone because, like I said, everyone's on the same team here, right? And so we need principals to understand this. We need parents to understand this. We need therapists and tutors and coaches to understand this. If you want to learn more about the book, you can go to meeteverylearnersneeds.org. And there I have more about the book and resources from the book. So either place, I think, is a good place to start. And both places have tons of free resources. The goal of this organization is not to make money. It's to empower educators and young people. So I hope listeners will find things on the book site and the Modern Classrooms site that are empowering.
Awesome. They will. I'm no doubt of that. I've spent time checking out the resources and they're super helpful and accessible. So I just want to say thank you. Listeners, I will have links to all the things that came up in our conversation as well as the resources Rob just mentioned in the show notes page. So check that out. But Rob, thank you so much and good luck with your mission to change education from the inside. It's awesome.
Thank you. I really appreciated the chance to share it with you.
You've been listening to the Tilt Parenting Podcast. To learn more about today's guest and the resources we talked about, check out the extensive show notes page on Tilt Parenting. There you'll find key takeaways, links to all the resources mentioned, and even a full transcript of our conversation. Just go to tiltparenting.com/podcast and select this episode. If you're looking for personal support from me and connection with the phenomenal community of parents raising neurodivergent kids, join us in the recently rebooted Differently Wired Club. The new Differently Wired Club can help you cultivate the positive shifts you're hoping for. Go to tiltparenting.com/club to learn more. The Tilt Parenting Podcast is hosted by me, Debbie Reber, author of Differently Wired and the founder of Tilt Parenting, and was edited by Andrea Curtis Amasquita. To support this show, please join my Patreon campaign where you can set up a small monthly contribution. Just go to patreon.com/tiltparenting to learn more. If you want to follow Tilt on social media, you can find us at @tiltparenting on Instagram and Facebook. And lastly, please take a minute to leave a 5-star rating or review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts. That helps this show stay visible so others can find it more easily. And that's all for this week. Stay safe, stay well, and take good care. And for more information about any of the parenting resources Tilt offers, visit tiltparenting.com.
Feel like you're the martyr in your family? You're not alone. Hey, this is Joanne.
And Bree.
And we're from the No Guilt Mom podcast. Bree, we talk to a lot of moms.
Yeah, we sure do.
And if you're a mom who has a to-do list that is so massive that you get overwhelmed and you shut down,
or if you've fallen into the habit of doing everything for everyone and don't know how to change it, we can help you become a no-guilt mom.
We're going to take you from family martyr to family model. That's role model, so that you role model the behavior that you want to see out of your kids.
You're going to go from being tired and overwhelmed to energized and guilt-free.
Every week, you'll get actionable strategies that you can implement right away from the experts that we interview and from us.
We also have a whole lot of fun, so check out the No Guilt Mom podcast everywhere you listen to your favorite shows.